What's going on, everyone? So, the Toronto Raptors are actively trying to trade Pascal Siakam. Currently, based on reports, there are several teams that are interested in Siakam, from the Indiana Pacers, the Atlanta Hawks, the Dallas Mavericks, and even the Golden State Warriors. I'm sure that there will be several other teams that will at least touch base and inquire about Pascal Siakam. Toronto, at this point, it's in their best interest to go and trade Siakam. And he is a very quality piece for many teams, right? He's a legit 3-and-D style guy that can make plays. He can also operate as like your point forward if need be. He's a guy that's averaging 22 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, shooting 51.8% from the floor. 29 years old, so he's still on the right side of 30. So he would be a very nice piece for many teams to add. There are several teams that could really use kind of that 3 or 4 to add to the roster, and a guy that is an all-star level player, right? Now, from Toronto's standpoint, they probably should have gotten this done last season because now they're in a bit of a predicament, right? There's real questions about what is the return going to look like, given that he's going to go into unrestricted free agency. He's probably not signing an extension with you. He's probably not going to re-sign with you. You just finally made the move to trade OG Anunoby. So obviously it's time to hit that reset button. But there was a report that came out per Mark Stein that really throws a wrench in all of this. And this could bode very badly for the Toronto Raptors. So here's what was said. Any team that acquires Siakam will only be eligible to offer him a 2-year extension. And the veteran would prefer, again, to proceed to unrestricted free agency, meaning that any team that trades for him now must be daring enough to roll the dice, according to NBA insider Mark Stein. So again, this is not good at all for the Toronto Raptors if this is true and this is really the case, right? For starters, again, Toronto's in a position, right? It's time to hit the reset button. You got a guy in Emmanuel Quickley, got a guy in RJ Barrett, 2 guys that played excellent in their debut for the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors actually won their first game with these 2 in a jersey. And so now it's like, okay, well, you're trying to recoup and gain as many assets as possible to help expedite your rebuild. That's why I said they should have done this last season, right? There were teams that offered like 4 firsts for OG. And look, Quickley and Barrett is a solid return for OG, but it was nowhere near the type of returns that were reported and being rumored last season. And same thing with Pascal Siakam. If they would have traded him last season, they probably would have gotten a very sizable return for him, especially at the going rate in which guys are going. Like, look at like what Rudy Gobert went for, right? Like, you got to imagine that there would have been a solid return for both OG as well as Pascal. But yet Toronto, for whatever reason, Yashai Ujiri thought, hey, let me keep these guys. Let's, figure this out. We're going to be a team that's going to, turn it around or whatever. I don't know what the thinking, what the logic was in it, but Ujiri really dropped the ball, in my opinion, with that. But now he's finally made the move. But it might be too late now for Siakam. Because, again, any team that goes to look to trade for Siakam is now going to run the risk of him just leaving in free agency. Which, I'm not saying there won't be a team or two that maybe takes a chance that goes, well, hey, if he goes into free agency, we can sign him. But they're taking a gamble that teams don't just offer him the farm and he ends up going there, right? Because it doesn't make any sense for him to sign the 2-year extension unless he just doesn't get any offers or anything like that from anywhere else, right? Now, could whichever team trades for him, could they look at it as like, is he going to go to a bad team, right? Because you look at a team like the Spurs have money, like Detroit has money. Like, there's teams that have money in the offseason, but how many of those teams are going to go and say, like, oh, what we need is a Pascal Siakam, right? And how many of those teams would Pascal want to go to, right? So where if he goes to, say, a Warriors or a Mavs team or something like that, and they're really good, right? Does he go, okay, well, let's figure this out one way or another. Like, let's try to see what we can do. It's an interesting predicament because he's going to want to get paid. Absolutely. And I'm sure he's going to want to be on a contender, but if somebody is able to kind of figure that out, especially a team like Indiana, right? Indiana can make some moves, do some things, right? They need to unload some guys, right? I mean, we'll see what happens with like a Miles Turner in the offseason. I don't necessarily think that they'll trade him this season, but in the offseason, they may look at it and go, well, hey, we're not doing anything, right? Like, we've been a middle of the pack team. Let's unload him. Maybe you work out some sign and trade or some 3-team deal to go get Siakam. I don't know. Again, there's options. Right? I'm just using that as an example, but maybe some other team would work out a sign and trade. But even then, Siakam is best to go into free agency, right? So if a team can pay him, then they probably don't need to do the trade. So it is a risk. It is a gamble, which then causes now the Raptors to lose a ton of leverage, right? Because again, if you're, say Dallas or whatever, are you selling the rest of your farm to go and acquire a Pascal Siakam just for him to potentially leave? Indiana, the Warriors, whatever, right? Like, let's say the Warriors were willing to give up a Kuminga, right? And it's like, hey, well, maybe we trade Kuminga to go get, Pascal Siakam. Like, that would help. That'd be beneficial. But now it's like, do we really want to do that? And then Pascal say, all right, I'm out of here. And now we lost, we just basically gave away Jonathan Kuminga for nothing. And now we're in a position where we don't have that young player that we could use for the future or even trade for another trade later on down the road. And we don't have Pascal Siakam. So now it's like, now what do you do, right? Like, that's something that teams are definitely going to take into account. This is why I was preaching last season that trade. What are you doing? Why are you waiting around? Go trade Siakam for whoever. I mean, the Warriors were desperate last year. You probably could have gotten Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga and other stuff for Pascal Siakam, right? But for whatever reason, Jerry thought, no, I want to ride it out with these guys, knowing that Siakam was going to go into free agent, knowing that, that OG was going to need a new contract. All of these things, it's just like, what? I don't understand what the logic was. But we've seen even Chicago, right? I talked about Chicago last year. I think Chicago should have sold the farm last year also. Right now they're trying to trade Zach LaVine, and it's like the market is very limited. It's not really that. We're last trade deadline, there were several teams that may have said, you know what, let's just go get him. Let's go, throw the farm at it. Even a team like the Lakers who were interested in Zach LaVine, right? Like, they were desperate last year. I mean, you could make an argument they're a little desperate this year, but I don't think they were as desperate as they were last year, right? I still think that they could be a little patient, and now they're in a position where even if they don't do anything this season, in the offseason, they'd have like 3 firsts available to trade. So they could be patient, right? So you look at a team like Chicago, I look at a team like Toronto, team like Atlanta, right? Like, some of these teams, it's just like, you knew you weren't going anywhere. Like, what was going to magically turn around, right? What was what could have Toronto done this offseason that would have been like, oh, okay, this is why we kept them? Obviously, not that happened. They got like Dennis Schroeder, right? But like, what could you have done that would have really righted the ship here and put yourself in a position where it's like, okay, it made sense to keep OG. It made sense to keep Siakam. I can't think of anything, right? So, and guess what? Nothing happened. And now you're in a position where it's like, okay, well, now you have to trade Siakam because you're going to lose him for nothing. And you are running the risk of losing value. Now, maybe, look, there's always the possibility that a team just says, hey, we'll trust that Siakam's not going to go anywhere, right? Or we believe that we can get him to stay. You've seen teams take chances and stuff like that. I mean, like OKC did it a couple years with Paul George, right? Everyone thought Paul George was going to the Lakers, like, right? Why would OKC go and trade for Paul George? That made no sense. They basically gave everything up to just get him for a rental, and he ended up re-signing with them, right? So you never know. It's always a possibility that he goes to a place where he's happy and he's like, okay, this is where I want to be, and you kind of work out the semantics. I mean, that could happen, but it's just Toronto really just, I don't know. I don't know what the thinking was, but hey, we'll see how this plays out. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? Do you think that they messed up and dropped the ball? Do you think nah, hey, you know what? It'll work out. It'll be fine. However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate you all. See you in the next one. Thank you.